The day someone tried to bury me with lies. I want to tell you something I have never said out loud before. There was a morning I walked into my own courtroom and felt the room turn against me before I even sat down. Not because I had done something wrong, but because someone had decided that destroying my name was their path to glory, and they had come prepared, or so they believed. I have spent decades on this bench protecting people from lies. That morning, I had to protect myself from them. And what I learned that day about truth, about ego, about the kind of courage it takes to stay still when the world is screaming at you, I think you need to hear it. If stories about real justice, real character, and real consequences mean something to you, please subscribe right now, because this is exactly the kind of story we tell here. Now let me take you back. Her name was Carol Briggs. She walked into that courtroom like she owned every inch of it. Heels clicking, chin raised, a thick folder pressed against her chest like she was carrying the Constitution itself. She was not nervous, she was electric. The kind of energy a person carries when they have convinced themselves they are about to change history. She had been planning this moment for months. Carol ran a small online channel, a few thousand followers, where she posted what she called exposure content, videos about powerful people hiding secrets, institutions covering up their crimes, truth warriors like herself fighting alone against a corrupt world. She had built her whole identity around being the person who saw what others missed, the one brave enough to say what everyone else was too scared to say. And she had decided that I was her biggest story yet. She had spent weeks digging through internet forums, conspiracy blogs, old message boards. She had printed screenshots, copied posts, assembled a folder of what she called damning evidence that would expose my entire career as a fraud. She believed she was about to become famous. She had no idea what was coming. I noticed her the moment I entered the room. You develop a sense for it after decades, a read on the energy, and Carol's energy was unmistakable. It was the energy of someone who had rehearsed their big moment so many times in the mirror that they could no longer tell rehearsal from reality. She looked at me with the kind of expression people wear when they believe they already know something devastating about you. Not hatred exactly, something worse, superiority. I sat down. I folded my hands. I looked at her calmly, and I waited, because I have learned this about people who come carrying manufactured outrage. They need you to react. They need you to get defensive, to raise your voice, to confirm their narrative that you are rattled and guilty. Your composure is the thing that confuses them most. So I gave her my composure, completely, without condition. Proceed, I said. She stood. She straightened. She opened that folder with a dramatic flourish, letting the pages rustle loudly, like the sound alone was evidence. I am here today, she announced, projecting toward the gallery, because the public deserves the truth. And the truth is that the judge sitting on this bench has a past she has been hiding for over 30 years. The room stilled. She lifted the first sheet. This, she said, voice rising with satisfaction, is a misconduct report filed against you in 1987. It details witness intimidation. It details the suppression of evidence. It details a pattern of abuse that was buried by people in power who wanted to protect their own. She looked at me, waiting for the crack. I looked back at her, steady. Read it to me, I said quietly. She did. Every word, every accusation, every charge. She read it with the conviction of someone who had rehearsed this too, who had imagined this moment going a very specific way. When she finished, the room waited. I said nothing for a moment, not because I was shaken, but because I wanted her to feel the silence. I wanted her to hear what silence sounds like when it isn't fear. Carol, I finally said, my voice soft, where did you get that document? She smiled. From a source. A source, I repeated. What was the source's name? Anonymous. I nodded once, slowly. And where was this report filed? With the New York Judicial Oversight Board. I see, I said. And are you familiar with how judicial oversight records are maintained in this state? Her smile tightened just slightly. I know enough. Then you know, I continued gently, that those records are sealed. They are not accessible to members of the public. They cannot be downloaded. They cannot be printed from a website. They certainly do not appear on anonymous forums. A murmur moved through the gallery, soft but real. Carol's chin lifted. Whistleblowers can leak anything. They can try, I agreed. But the document you just read to this room has 3 formatting inconsistencies that did not exist in official New York judicial filings in 1987. The header font was not standardized until 1994. The case reference numbering system you see there was not introduced until 1991. And the signature block at the bottom belongs to an official who did not join that board until 1995. Carol blinked. Once, twice. You printed that from a conspiracy website, I said, not as an accusation, as a fact, the way you tell someone it's raining outside. That's not, she started. Which website? I asked. The pause told the room everything. I want to stop here for a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, how did she stay so calm? How did she sit there and not get angry, not get emotional? How did she not feel humiliated? Here is the truth. I felt all of it. I felt the sting of hearing my name attached to words like intimidation and fraud in front of an audience. I felt the weight of sitting there while someone tried to reduce 50 years of honest work to a printout from the internet. I felt the weariness of being a woman who had spent her entire career proving herself, only to find herself having to prove herself again. But I have learned something over a long life behind this bench. Anger is what they want. Anger confirms their story. Anger says you are rattled. Anger says there is something to rattle. The one thing a liar cannot survive is a calm woman with facts. So I stayed calm, and I kept the facts close. Carol moved to her second document. This, she said, recovering her confidence with visible effort, is a sworn affidavit from a former colleague, a Judge Raymond Holt. He states specifically that you used your position to have charges dropped in exchange for political favors. I looked at the sheet she was holding. Judge Raymond Holt, I said slowly. Yes. Of which court? Manhattan. He presided there for over a decade. I let a breath pass. There has never been a judge named Raymond Holt presiding in Manhattan, I said. Not in my era, not in the decade before, not in the decade after. Carol's jaw tightened. You can't know every judge. In my jurisdiction, I replied, yes, I can. I knew every colleague on every bench I ever shared a city with. That is not arrogance. That is due diligence. He could have been. Raymond Holt, I said carefully, is a character from an unproduced legal drama. The script was written in 1993 and never filmed. It has been floating around fan fiction and script-sharing sites for years. The gallery shifted audibly. Carol's face flushed. That is not possible. The affidavit you are holding, I said, was copied from that script. The language is almost word for word. You can verify this yourself. The script is still online. A woman in the front row covered her mouth with her hand. Carol looked down at the paper, then back at me. And in that moment, I saw it. Not anger, not defiance, fear. Because she had walked into this room certain she had done research, certain she had uncovered something real, and the realization that she had not, that she had been fooled by the same conspiracy community she trusted to guide her. That realization was arriving in real time, in front of an audience, and she had nowhere to put it. I felt something unexpected in that moment. Not triumph, not satisfaction, sorrow, because I have seen this before. Not in courtrooms always, but in life. People who were so hungry to matter, so desperate to be the one who saw the truth no one else could see, that they stop asking whether what they found is actually true. They stop demanding evidence from their own sources. They simply believe because they want to. And the world is full of people and websites and forums that are very willing to give them something to believe. Carol set the papers down. She stood quietly for a moment, and the fight went out of her like air from a punctured tire. Slow, steady, impossible to stop. I really thought, she started. Her voice was different now, smaller. I really thought I had found something real. I looked at her directly, not with judgment, with honesty. I know, I said, and that is the most important thing you said today. She frowned. How is that the most important thing? Because it is the truth, I replied. For the first time this morning, you said something true. You believed it. That belief is real. But belief without verification is not evidence, and pain without proof is not justice. Carol's eyes filled. She didn't want them to. She blinked hard. I just wanted to expose something that mattered, she said. I just wanted to be someone who stood up. I understand that, I said, and I meant it. But standing up for a lie does not make you brave. It makes you a weapon someone else aimed at an innocent person. And in this case, that person was me. She looked at the floor. You did not find truth, I continued. You found what certain communities wanted you to find. You were the final link in a chain designed specifically to make people like you, passionate, angry, hungry for meaning, carry their fabrications into rooms like this one. A tear escaped down her cheek. She let it sit. The people who gave you those documents, I said softly, they knew exactly what they were doing. They built a story that would appeal to someone who felt invisible, someone who wanted to matter, someone who wanted a cause. They used you, Carol. That is the real injustice in this room today. The gallery had gone completely silent. Not the silence of entertainment, the silence of people who were thinking about something that applied to their own lives, about something they had shared online without checking, a story they had repeated because it matched what they already believed, a narrative they had trusted because the source seemed certain. I looked at Carol for a long moment. What do you actually do, I asked, in your life, outside of this? She hesitated. I teach, elementary school, 4th grade. Something landed in me quietly. Then you know what it feels like to stand in front of children and tell them the truth matters. You know what it costs to model honesty for someone who is watching you. Her lips trembled. Go back to that, I said. Go back to the classroom where you have already earned something real, where 25 children look at you every morning, trusting that what you tell them is true. That is not invisible work. That is essential work. You do not need a viral moment to matter. Carol pressed her hand over her mouth. I did not gloat. There was nothing to gloat about. A woman had walked in hoping to destroy something and instead discovered she had been carrying someone else's lie in her own hands. That is not victory. That is a painful, necessary education. This court, I said at last, turning to address the room formally, finds that no credible evidence of misconduct has been presented. The documents submitted have been demonstrated to be fabricated materials sourced from unverified online publications. All claims are dismissed. I paused. Additionally, the fabricated documents themselves will be referred to the appropriate authorities to identify and investigate their original source. Because whoever created them did not stop at Carol Briggs. These materials have been circulating for some time, targeting multiple public figures. That investigation will begin today. I set down my pen. And Miss Briggs, I added quietly, I am not filing action against you personally, because I believe you came here genuinely convinced of what you carried. Misguided conviction is painful enough on its own. The world doesn't need me to add to it. Carol looked up, surprised, almost broken by the generosity of it. The gavel came down once, soft, deliberate, finished. She was gone from the building within 20 minutes. I sat in my chambers afterward, alone for a few minutes before the next case. I poured a glass of water. I looked out the window at the ordinary street below. People walking, traffic moving, the world continuing exactly as it always does, regardless of what happens inside courtrooms. I thought about the thousands of people who would see Carol's original videos, the ones she had already posted, building anticipation for her big moment. I thought about the comments she had read, people cheering her on, calling her brave, calling her a warrior. None of them had asked for proof either. That is the world we live in now. The conviction of the storyteller has replaced the verification of the story. If you say it with enough certainty, enough outrage, enough emotional weight, people believe. They share. They amplify. And somewhere at the beginning of that chain, someone who knows exactly what they are doing is watching the lie travel and feeling satisfied. The only answer I have ever found to that is the same answer I have used behind this bench for 50 years. Be consistent. Be documented. Be boring in your commitment to evidence. Truth does not trend. It does not perform. It does not need music or editing or a dramatic pause before the reveal. It simply stands and keeps standing long after the noise has moved on. Weeks later, a small envelope arrived at my office. No return address, handwritten. Inside, a single card. I owe you an apology I do not deserve to give. I went back to my classroom. My students had a good week. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. C. I read it twice. Then I put it in my desk drawer, where I keep a small collection of things that remind me why I chose this work. Not the victories, not the verdicts that made headlines. The moments where the truth landed quietly in someone's hands, and something in them changed because of it. That is what justice looks like when it is working. Not a crowd roaring, not a smirk wiped from an arrogant face. Just a woman going back to her fourth graders and deciding to be honest with them again. I will tell you the thing I know for certain after a lifetime on this bench. Lies do not die loudly. They do not collapse in one dramatic moment with music and applause. They die slowly, one fact at a time, one quiet correction at a time, one person deciding to check before they share, one more time. And truth does not need a champion. It does not need someone to rescue it, or perform it, or carry it into a room with a folder full of printouts. Truth needs one thing only: patience. The patience to stand still while noise moves around it. The patience to outlast the loudest voice in the room. The patience to wait for the moment when the evidence speaks and the room goes quiet, and even the most convinced person has to reckon with what is actually real. I have been underestimated many times in my life. I have been dismissed, doubted, talked over, and in that courtroom, accused on record in front of an audience and cameras. And every time I came back to the same place: stand still, let truth catch up. It always does. If this story reminded you that integrity outlasts every attack against it, drop the word "stands" in the comments right now. And if you believe the quiet ones are often the strongest ones in the room, share this story with someone who needs to hear it today.